afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Gov at Cloud webinar series, episode 9, Agile Kung Fu. My name is Jessie, and I will be your host for today. While waiting for the others to join, let me give you a brief introduction to our Gov at Cloud webinar series. We first started hosting the webinar series in May 2020, and today we are at our 9th episode. It has been a great journey. Topics such as integration in public cloud, OIDC migration, WGAD integration, and many more have been discussed so far. If you are interested to find out more, you may subscribe to our YouTube channel. Let me drop the link in the chat box now. You may also follow our Facebook, LinkedIn, to receive the latest updates or news of Toppan Ecquaria. And the links are now in the chat box too. Aside from the social media platforms that I have just mentioned, we are now on Telegram too. And I'm very happy to share that we are now giving free t-shirts to our Telegram subscribers. So we have two colors. If you're interested to get one, simply download Telegram from the app store, subscribe to Toppan Ecquaria's Telegram channel, and contact us at ecqmarketing@toppanecquaria.com to claim. I'm going to drop the email in the chat box as well. Just give me 1 second. So it's pretty simple, just 3 steps. Download and follow us, and then contact us via this email, and we will liaise with you on the collection of the t-shirt. Also, if you do not have the app now, you can click to this link to reach our Telegram channel directly. Alright, back to the session today. Again, welcome to Gov at Cloud webinar series, episode 9, Agile Kung Fu. In the next half an hour, our Scrum Master, Ken T, will be sharing with you our experience with Agile implementation. If you have any questions, please feel free to let us know by clicking the Q&A button located at the bottom of your screen. If you wish to arrange for further discussions, please feel free to email us at ecqmarketing@toppanecquaria.com. Earlier, I have shared the email address in the chat box, so feel free to email us. Alright, let me do a quick check on the number of participants in the webinar. Okay, we have the most participants on board now. Thank you for joining us today again. And without further ado, let me hand over to Kenti. Kenti, please.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Agile Kung Fu webinar. I'm Kenti, the speaker for today. Let me give a quick background about myself. I have more than 10 years of experience in project management. Been managing projects using waterfall agile approach, delivering IoT solutions, mobile applications, and web applications. So in today's webinar, I'll be sharing some of my views, my experience, some of the key elements to successful practicing agile. So before we start, I would like to know your experience in terms of working with agile projects, not necessarily in project management or Scrum Master. Your experience could be from a developer, user, QA. Some feedback from everyone so that I can better adjust the flow of this webinar. Let's see if we have some Agile Kung Fu Master here today with us. Okay, so we have more than 50% of participants has no experience with Agile. We have 36% with 1 to 3 years of experience, and we have 7% that have 4 to 6 years experience. Okay, so Thanks for the feedback. Okay, here's the agenda for today. First, I'll be sharing my views on Scrum framework and some misconception of Agile. Then I'll be finishing this by sharing my personal experience and some key elements to successful practicing Agile. So when we talk about Agile development framework, there are many out there. There's Scrum, Kanban, XP, Spotify, Safe, Less, Lean. Over the years, organization tends to add or mix framework to their environment. If I would relate it to Kung Fu, there are Wing Chun, Karate, Taekwondo, Judo, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Interestingly, like Agile framework, people see the benefit of combining skills rather than using one, lead to mixed martial arts MMA championship that we have today. Scrum is the most common practice. It became very popular in Singapore since 2015. Not to waste too much time here explaining the Scrum framework, here's a short Scrum refresher just to get everyone aligned on what I'll be explaining later on in the slide.
Complex projects can lead to real headaches. Organizing the team, changes in scope, roles that aren't clear. But you can change that with Scrum, an agile framework. At its foundation, Scrum can be applied to any project or product development effort. Here's how it works. A product owner creates the product backlog, a prioritized wish list. During sprint planning, the team pulls a chunk from the top of that list and decides how to complete it. The team has a set time frame, the sprint, to complete their work. They meet in a daily scrum to keep the work moving forward. Along the way, the Scrum Master keeps the team focused. At the end of the sprint, the work should be potentially shippable. The team conducts a sprint review on the product and a retrospective on the process. Then, they choose the next chunk of the backlog, and the cycle repeats. With Scrum, you can ensure the most valuable work has been completed by the time the project ends. Tackle your projects.
Okay, thank you for watching. So I started my I started my Scrum practice in 2017. I took the Scrum Master certification course. Feeling excited, can't wait to implement it right away. Scrum sounded logical and simple enough to understand. Then I realized what it really means by it is not a methodology. Rather, it is a framework or reference that you need to adapt it to your environment. Projects are not the same. Different team, different scope, different technology, different maturity of their knowledge on Agile or Scrum. I will show some example of how we adapted the framework to our own environment in the later slide. To further support my point, here is comparison of the guide between 2017 and 2020. The latest guide continues to emphasize that it is incomplete, and it also tends to be less prescriptive. What do I mean by less prescriptive? For example, change is in the daily Scrum. Latest ones say developer can select whatever structure and techniques. The older one suggested the developer need to explain what they did yesterday, what they do today, and any blocker. Important is to make sense of what you do. If daily scrums feels like a death march, time to rethink your approach. Daily scrum is not a status update meeting. It is a meeting for collaboration. Not sure if this sounds familiar to you. Example of a status update. I was working on the login page yesterday. Doing the same today, no blocker. Same status update for 5 days, and on the 5th day, there is a blocker with SingPass login. Here's an example of using more collaborative approach. For example, I was working on a login page yesterday. The wordings are a bit lengthy, making the screen a bit ugly. I tried to share the screenshot with you after this. We'll continue to work on it today. Aside from that, I might have a problem with SingPass integration later on. Not sure if anyone in the team has some knowledge in the integration or some library that can share with me. The collaborative approach gives us his view on his work and highlighted upcoming issues so that the team has time to prepare for it. Rather than from a status update, you will only know on the 5th day that you have a problem. Let me summarize what I'm trying to explain here. Don't follow the framework blindly. Understand the value of it is important. Then adapt accordingly. Okay, next, the second agenda today, I'll be explaining some of the misconceptions of Agile. First, similar to traditional waterfall approach, when they switched from waterfall to Agile, customers did not anticipate that they will be involved during the implementation phase. Second is linked to an Agile value, response to change over following a plan. It is actually saying we should not stick to the same plan created from the beginning of the project. The third one also linked to an Agile value, working software over comprehensive documents. It's not saying that we don't need documentation at all. We need it for the sake of handover after the completion of the project. On the other hand, we need to make sure we don't waste too much time on it. Let me explain the first point further. So customers should be willing to commit their time in the project, participate in all Scrum events, including the daily Scrum, if the project has high level uncertainty. Feedback loop is very important. For Agile project, the high level of uncertainty, this is really important. I've been in project with a very busy PO, very hard to catch, send an email, it took time to respond. There's a delay in decision making, hence delaying the process, the project. If you cannot get feedback fast enough, time will be wasted on rework. Let me explain the second point further. For a fixed timeline or budget project, this misconception creates fear to the vendor that we should not ask for feedback. And for the customer, this should not introduce any delay to the project. We welcome change for the better good of product, but aware of the timeline or budget. In order to do so, user story need to be prioritized. Exchange user story to keep the timeline or budget, and then extend the timeline or budget if you need to add more to the scope. Let me explain the last point. It's important to adapt the way we document. Some of the documents can be adapted. For example, functional spec can be replaced by user story because we'll be working on user story very frequently compared to a functional spec. Then we need to work on documentation progressively. Try not to spend too much time on the earlier stage of the project when there's high uncertainty. You waste time trying to adapt the document. We should only document what is necessary, maybe not the following: project management plan, requirement spec, change management procedure, and etc. So all these documents come from the traditional waterfall approach. I remember how painful is it to keep changing the project management plan for a complex project. Things keep changing, feature, reprioritize, resource, keep moving around. So you spend so much time working on this project management plan. Time should be spent on value-added tasks instead. For example, resolve impediments, improve efficiency and quality. Okay, so far I've shared my views on Scrum framework and misconception on Agile. Now I'm going to share some experience to effective implementing Agile. So I have 5 to share here. I'll explain each of them in the later slide. So I have adapt to environment. Next one, I'll explain work as a team. Then build the right product. Fast feedback loop. Then lastly, I'm going to share some of the techniques we can use to prioritize our user story. Okay, let's zoom into the first one. Okay, so this is the Scrum framework, the very bare minimum of it. We have the user story and the typical sprint cycle. So this is sufficient if you don't have a fixed timeline or budget. We can just start immediately once we have the product backlog ready. So we can just start working on a user story, and then time to time they will inspect and adapt and so on. Then for the project with fixed timeline or budget, normally for government project, this is the case. We added Sprint 0 for the planning and preparation. And for government project as well, we need the UAT, performance security sign-off, at the end of the project. That's why we added a release sprint at the end. These are the activities that we cannot do in a normal sprint because we need to freeze the code prior to the sign-off. Okay. And then to support incremental development and DevSecOps, we added dedicated QA team to perform the automated testing, regression testing, performance testing, and security testing. For complex or high uncertainty projects, where we need to engage user and stakeholder heavily, we added dedicated team to perform the user story refinement. For complex project, this approach is introduced because we realize the developer do not have time to work on so many things within the sprint. Let me share you one example, one of the projects that I've encountered. So we started off with Sprint 0 and Release Sprint on top of the Scrum framework. And then the developer, then we have the case that a lot of time the developer are pulled out from the meeting, from the development work to meet the customer, to discuss user story, to prepare demo, prototype for them to see. And then at the other hand, the developer need to make sure that the automated testing is still working fine every day. So it introduced a lot of context switching, and then this introduced a lot of delay in the project. And then because the thing is, the developer keep switching context, and then they are not able to commit their work in the sprint itself. So sprint planning doesn't make sense for them anymore. They are very demotivated because what's the point of sprint planning if, I'm not sure, they're not sure whether they can finish on time or not. So we made a change. We have team dedicated for the user story refinement and also for the QA. So for Sprint 0, here are things that we need to prepare. Depends on the complexity of the project. So we have the product backlog, prioritized, swim lane diagram, domain models, bounded context, source code repo, dev environments, system architecture, UI UX design. This is to make sure everyone is aligned with the scope and development strategy. Then we need to align the product vision and high-level timeline with everyone, since it's a fixed timeline or budget project. We need to define the product goal. So we need to know the vision of this project. What is it going to be, the final stage of the product? How is it going to be, and where it's going to host? And then we also need to align with everyone. What's the success factor? What's the key performance index that we are measuring? Just to know that, just to get everyone aligned, and after this is deployed, what are the key success factor that we're looking at? Then for the MVP, we need to identify the core feature. Example, those we would like users to benefit from first, or feature with high uncertainty they want to get feedback from. So with this feedback, we can further enhance our user story, our upcoming user stories. Then finally, the release burnout chart. Compared to a conventional Gantt chart, with this and with the help of the right Agile tool, we're able to show the forecast fast. Finally, we need to have the working agreement prior to the start of the project. We have various Scrum meetings. PO users and stakeholders are normally from the customer. It helps in clarifying requirements and be able to make decisions fast. Then we need to agree on the definition of ready and definition of done for the user story. When the user story is ready, what does it mean? it means that the developer can start working on it. Don't start working on user story that wasn't ready, still in the midst of clarifying requirements. What do you mean by a user story when it's done? So when the developer says it's done, that means, for example, the code has checked in, unit tested, there's no regression, no big issue found. So there's an example of definition of done. Lastly, you need to commit on the 5 Scrum values. They need to be committed and focus on the goal, openly voice out if there's any problem, respect each other, know where we come from, have the courage to do the right thing, and work tough problems. The next key element I would like to share is working as a team. Okay. So from my experience, this is really important. Vendor and customer need to work as a team towards a common goal. We shouldn't draw lines. If possible, we should meet 15 minutes every day. Be transparent in what we are doing every day. We should respect and understand each other. We should all understand our scope of work and help each other. Let me share my one experience from one of my projects. So we have a product owner that's very committed to the project. He participates in all our meetings. She joined our daily scrum. So she's with us every morning for 15 minutes. So she knows exactly where we are, what problem are we facing, how are we doing, what's the risk ahead. She knows. So whenever her boss asks her for status update for the project, he can immediately tell him so. And then because of this close working relationship, we're able to get her feedback very fast. So when the developer will share his or her progress and then show her, and then she's able to give feedback immediately on the spot. Or if, let's say, sometimes she's not able to answer to our question, she'll immediately loop in all the users and get their feedback. So it actually helps us to reduce the need to rework time to time. So rework is not heavy. So we have more time. In fact, we completed the project earlier than what we expected. So we completed initial scope of the project, and then we still have some time. So this time we are able to make use of it, and then we add in a few more of the improvement. So aside from what we have committed during the kick-off meeting, we also provide more to the customer. Okay. So teamwork makes the dream work. So we should not work in silo. PO should not just write user story, prioritize. Scrum Master should not just facilitate meetings and do whatever is written in user story. We need to help each other. PO can ask advice. Together, work to achieve better solution. If the PO needs some technical advice, feel free to ask the developer during the daily meeting, or you can schedule another meeting for that. Then developers can voice out if there are any difficulties or foresee any risks ahead. And then if the PO is new to Scrum, the Scrum Master should give guidance and help out. Don't just wait for the product backlog to be filled up. Just wait, and then blame the user story for being badly written, and hence the project's delayed. Next, I will share the importance of building the right product. For complex projects, it's hard to define the right product at the beginning. So we need regular inspection and adaptation. Successful project is where product matches user and stakeholders with expectation. Successful project is not only about completing the project on time. We should all continue to ask ourselves if we are building the right product for the users. Not sure if everyone heard about the mini disc. Yeah. If you haven't, probably because it wasn't very successful. So the selling point for this is small inconvenience, but the cost of failure is poor adaptation from record companies. The next example is the 3D TV. So lots of promotion, every electronic stores were selling them. Not saying building next iPhone is easy, but at least we should try our best to understand our user and stakeholders. For internal users, show demo regularly, get their feedback and adapt accordingly. For public users, consider launching it to a limited users or indicate to the users that this is a trial. So it helps to get feedback earlier and without worrying that there will be complaining about the product, because this is a trial, or it's just to the limited users. Okay, so we talked about build the right product. We need to get feedback from our user and stakeholder regularly. Without this, it doesn't work as well. So we need to work closely with user and stakeholder, conduct bi-weekly system demo in every sprint review, if possible. Then we need to receive feedback and response quick. Well, easily said than done. In my past experience, I faced problem where stakeholder doesn't join a sprint review, only get his feedback during UAT. So we were working on the development, and then we were showing the users for every sprint review. We show them demo, and then we move on to the UAT, and then everything. So we fix a lot of problems, and then finally we get the UAT sign off from the user. Then after that, it's the stakeholder to sign off. So the stakeholder at that time refused to sign off, and then says that he'll need this additional requirement to be in before it's deployed. He insisted on it. So it caused a few weeks of delay. So we learned our lesson. We should always find a way to reach out to him. Like, for example, sending a recorded sprint review session or recorded demo or prototype to try to get hold of him. So we tried this method, and then the team is able to anticipate his request earlier rather than at the sign off, because we are already celebrating, we are more or less done, and then out of nowhere it was blocked, and then it kind of demotivated the team. So we adapted this approach, and then things are getting better. It's more predictable. So a successful project depends on a fast feedback loop. If it's not happening, and we need to think of a way. Don't just stop there. Okay, in the earlier slide, I talked about for fixed timeline or budget project, there is a need to prioritize user story. Here, I'm going to share a few methods to do so. So for a fixed timeline or budget project, it's important to prioritize user story based on Morse code method. So we have the must have, should have, could have, won't have. So must have are those user story that we die must have. Should have is important to have. Could have is good to have. And won't have are those that if we have time, then we'll work on it. Then after prioritization, we'll start working on the must have first, followed by the should have, could have, then won't have, if we have time. So prioritizing can be simple or complex. So it can be as simple as deciding the core feature or those we want users to try out first. Then for complex one, it involves calculating the cost of delay and the workload needed. So user story mapping is a great method to help us visualize. Here example of user story for an online bookstore. We have list of activity from login, search, checkout, payment. Then we prioritize essential user story on the top, the one in dark blue. Usually we have the MVP here. So MVP usually will define on this essential role here. And then for those that are for improvement, we'll prioritize it at the bottom. So for this example, we should work on for the login function. We should work on the username password first compared to the rest of Google ID login, Apple ID login, because we want to get this feature out soon so we can start to generate revenue. Then for the search function, we should prioritize the search by title, based on title, and based on category. Then for checkout, we should allow a basic checkout. Let the user move on to the payment. So a payment, for this example, so Visa and MasterCard is something that they know. They know the payment gateway. They know how to integrate it. So they'll prioritize this one so that they can get this bookstore out quickly, and then start to generate revenue from there, or start to get feedback from their user. So those that can be prioritized later or can be done in the future release are those like, for example, login Google ID, login using Apple ID, and search based on top sellers, based on ratings, based on which books are on sale. And then for checkout, you might want to shows before you go on for a payment. You can show some of the books that you think the user might be interested with, so maybe you can buy more from there. And then for payment, you can integrate more of other payment methods for example, PayLah, PayNow, GrabPay, Alipay. Okay, so this is an example of using user story mapping. Then next method I want to introduce is the calculating the weighted shortest job first, WSJF. So it helps us identify which job is smaller in workload, higher in delivering value. Imagine we are a company that sells buses. So every bus we sell, for example, we'll get maybe $200K. So in this example here, I have 3 jobs with equal cost of delay. So this cost of delay means if you don't do it now, you're going to have the cost for the delay. That means you will not be able to generate 200K. Okay, so I have the job A, B, C here. So the first job A requires 1 day, job B requires 3 days, and job C requires 10 days. So each of these jobs will generate the same revenue. So which job we should choose first? Which job we should prioritize first? Okay, obviously it's job A, since smaller in workload, higher in delivering value. Okay, I should just spend 1 day and then I'll be able to get 200K rather than spending 3 days or 10 days. I should get this out first. I should do this first. Okay, so here is another example with big, medium, and small bus. So the big bus will help you generate 300K, medium one will help you generate 200K, and the smallest one will help you generate 100K. So 3 jobs has equal workload. Which one we should do first? Okay, obviously it's still job A, since they have the same workload, but it delivers higher value. Okay. Okay, so that's the end of my sharing. Hope it's useful to you. Agile is still evolving. There are new framework introduced, new techniques. Try to learn them, adapt it to your environment. Hope one day, maybe I could learn from you all too. Together, let's strive to deliver the right product to our users. I'll hand over this stage to Jessie now. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you, Kinti, for the presentation. I hope this can help our clients in their future Agile implementation. So now it's time for Q&A. Let's welcome Ji Bin, the Director of Digital Government Transformation, to join us. Hi, Ji Bin.
Thank you, Jessie, and good morning to friends in Singapore and countries in this part of the world, and a very good afternoon, rather, and a very good morning to friends from other parts of the world that are probably having breakfast right now. So thank you for joining us and staying until now. I see quite a lot of participants, and if you have any questions, please fire away and start posting them on the chat window.
All right, thank you, Ji Bin. Okay, so just now Kenti has given us a very comprehensive experience sharing and some tips sharing. So now let's move to the Q&A session. I do have a few questions received here. Maybe we shall start with this one. The question asks, how accurate is the release burn down chart compared to the traditional project Gantt chart? Kenti, do you have anything to share with us?
Yeah, okay. So so I've been working with the traditional waterfall approach, and then now I'm using basically for the past 5 years I've been using Scrum, which is using the release burn down chart. Okay, so when I switch over from a Gantt chart to a release burn down chart, I feel that it's comparable. I mean the accuracy of the estimate comes from the team. How mature is it? Whether they know the technology well. So all these are the main contribution of how accurate your estimation is. So estimation or the timeline. So to me, it's comparable. So if you are using if you're working on a project that has high level uncertainty, I would propose to use the release burn down chart because it's lighter, and then it's able to provide the progress timeline faster. Yeah.
I see. Thank you, Kenti. Jibin, do you have anything to add?
Well, probably use a phrase that our Thai friends would say, kind of same but different, because that's how they see the tools, right? Because well, they are same because they actually can be used to show the progress of the project, right? So you release, you can see the progress of the agile projects from sprint to sprint, and of course you can see that something along the same lines if you use Gantt charts. You see the bars, and then you have a percentage of completion. So both show the progress of the project in that similar manner. Personally, I'd like to use the release burn down chart because it's just the way it's been visualized in the line way. You can see things a lot at the start, and then it starts going down the line as the sprint progresses. So if I add the team velocity to it, actually I can also visualize whether the team can complete the required story points by the end of the release on time. So using past data to then make some predictions or make some estimates on whether we can actually do it rather than based on gut feel. All right. But for complex projects that have both agile and non-agile elements, which we encounter many times, sometimes a project management plan using Gantt charts could be useful. So on top of let's say we're doing agile, so we can use that release burn down chart. But on top of that, there's an overall project plan that we can use the Gantt charts. So why you want to use Gantt charts? Because especially for those non-agile parts, like for instance, hardware procurement and also manufacturing, we have a project that we actually do robotics for our customers. So for that, you once you go into manufacturing, you can't really agile anymore because you already made the stuff ready. So before that, you can use agile to do prototyping. But once you go to manufacturing, it's really kind of waterfall process. So I would say, I guess a good practitioner have many tools, and again, depending on the circumstances, you probably want to use the right tools to on the project itself.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Jibin. Okay. I hope we have answered this question well. All right. Let me move on because there are quite a few more. All right. There's another question about Scrum. Can I use Scrum for all my projects? Maybe Kenti?
Okay. So Scrum is not a silver bullet for every project. Okay. So Scrum is for projects that are high uncertainty. So for projects that are like for projects like those like support and maintenance kind of project. So normally we use Kanban instead. And then let's say if those projects that's a low uncertainty, the customer has know exactly what they want. And then we also did it many times before. And then it's better to use a waterfall approach. So by saying this, I'm not saying that we should fall back to the traditional one, but in fact we should adopt agile mindset to it, make it more agile. We can deliver iteratively, but not as frequent as Scrum wants it to be. Yeah. So we need to for every project is different. So we need we need to adjust and use different framework if possible.
Okay. I see. All right. Chipin, anything to add?
I think Katie has said it all. Yeah. See, I guess one more thing to add is really a traditional Scrum is really designed for a team. So you look at more complex projects, we're looking at multiple teams or large scale Scrum, then you have to use other frameworks on top of the traditional Scrum. So you can use less, safe. It depends on what you're comfortable with. There's no prescribed framework for that. Something that we can talk about, but I guess maybe in a subsequent webinars.
All right. Yeah. Thank you. All right. We do have a few more questions here. Okay. What about this one? Is the duration of involvement for different Scrum events fixed for all projects, or for different projects we can have different timings? For example, 2 hours for sprint review become 3 hours if the project is complex. Kenty?
Okay, so what I have listed down in the slide earlier about the timing for each of the Scrum event are assuming that we are using 2 weeks sprint duration. So those are the maximum time that we should be involving ourselves on. So we shouldn't for sprint planning. So it depends on the complexity of the project. So for example, if the project is less complex, you shouldn't need that amount of time. And then for daily Scrum, so we set like maximum 15 minutes, for example. So if let's say your project is only involving 1 or 2 developers or 3 developers, it could most probably finish within 5 minutes. So the time duration can be adjusted. I mean, those are just a recommended duration. So based on your project, if you can try out a few times, and then if let's say it's really if you don't need that much of time, then you can just reduce it. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Thank you. Jibin, anything to add?
Yeah, probably I think this is about it. I think that it's always going. There's a lot of questions. I guess sometimes people look at Scrum and say, hey, this is there's a lot of recommendation, but ultimately from a project standpoint, from a practitioner standpoint, it's really what is the intent. You must understand the intent of why certain things are certain guidelines. Scrum actually have a lot of guidelines, and why certain guidelines are given, and then how do you then adapt or adopt that into your project, your organization, and once you understand that, right, you realize that actually the project team itself has quite a bit of free play on what you can do. Of course, it doesn't mean that you take one whole day to do, say, sprint review. That's crazy, so that's not something that you want to do. Okay.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Jibin. Okay, we still have some time here. Maybe we can have one more question. Let me see. Okay, I have received a question here. So it asks, how do you manage the issue of having too many feedback and it end up lead to base scope are pushed down and not able to deliver with time frame? Then finally contractor will impose this as additional scope, incur more cost.
Okay. Maybe I'll just take this question.
Yeah,
so
sure.
Okay, so this happened to I think most of the project lah. So we started with the base scope, and then time to time we have new scope coming in. I think we should do it this way and do it that way. So these are normal for agile project. We understand that, totally fine with that. So I think the more important thing is we need to really prioritize, as I shared earlier. So every time this kind of user story are added, we need to prioritize where does it belong to. So in the end, we need, because we have a fixed timeline, we have fixed budget for this. So when new features come in, it obviously is going to introduce it's going to extend the timeline. So we need to identify which are the user story that we won't have. So if we will do it if we have time. So we need to prioritize it that way. So if let's say we really need everything, then we have to rediscuss the budget or the timeline. Yeah. So at the end of the day, it's more of the discussion. So we put everything on the table, and we'll discuss how we should approach this.
I see.
Kind of like what Indy mentioned just now. Back to the Moscow method of prioritizing, and then ultimately, based on whatever time you have and whatever budget you have, what can you do?
I see. Okay. All right. Thank you, and I hope we have answered the question. And let me see. Okay, maybe one last question.
Okay.
There's one more question about comparing to waterfall. So, does agile always mean faster delivery compared to waterfall? How do you ensure you have enough budget for agile projects since it's so dynamic?
Maybe I'm trying to answer that because it's one of those $1,000,000 questions again. Agile versus waterfall, which one is better? That's why I guess you can't say really which one is better. Again, it depends on the situation. But of course, generally, I would say we would take the agile approach nowadays. Why? Okay, it's not. I won't say it's better, but the agile approach does give some very significant advantage. And what would that be? First of all, it does require certain things be in place. For instance, you have actually much closer user interaction. That's number one. Okay, because if you do meet the product owner very frequently, you have actually a product owner that can make this decision, and that's important. So if you get a poor product owner, maybe you can get into some trouble. And one of the things that we do one of the engagement, so-called user interaction that we do in Agile is the demos that we show to the users, not just paper requirements that we diligently document for a couple of months, then get some stamp approval along sometime downstream, but real stuff that we have actually developed or prototype and show the users this is what you want, correct? And then they endorse on it. Or if they didn't like it, they can give feedback. And that I thought is one of the really strength of Agile. So a lot of things aside, that really makes the project highly successful. If it's we have a good team working, good interaction with users are committed, so you can get something out. So you execute it in a, I guess, iterative waterfall manner. We actually practice a rational unified process. That can also happen as well. Right? We have good projects that actually also pretty well executed. So when you understand again the intent and some of the winning formulas behind these methods, right? You ask me which one is better, I would say, well, if you have these elements, then it will be highly successful. Yeah. But of course, Agile does cater a lot more to this kind of user interaction and frequent feedback, and hence that's why I feel Agile does have a much higher chance of success when you try to execute a project, and especially the feedback part is really key. Okay, and catching the problem up front rather than all the way at the end. Okay, that's again the second part of the question is let's see, how do you have enough budget for Agile projects since it's so dynamic? That's also one of those tricky questions because if you know what you're going to develop, I guess you would have enough budget because you can do a proper estimate, right? So if I say, hey, I don't know, let me make an estimate of something I'm very familiar with. I guess in Singapore we have chicken rice. Hey, how much is a plate of chicken rice across the street? I would make an excellent estimate. But you ask me, how much is a meal, say in I don't know, in some other countries that I've never been to, right? Maybe in Latin America. So my estimate may be way out. So because I cannot imagine the end product. So with that kind of examples, right? So it really depends on your do you have a good view of the end product? If not, then some buffer will be necessary. How much buffer again? That would probably be another $1,000,000 question. Probably 20% of whatever you have estimated. That would be probably a good start.
All right. Thank you, Jibin. Kenty, you have anything to add?
No, I'm okay.
Yeah. All right. Okay. I guess we'll stop here for the Q&A. I'm sorry that if we didn't answer all the questions, but don't worry, we will get back to you via email or call to answer your question. All right. Thank you everyone for your time, and I hope today's presentation is useful for you. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm sorry that earlier there's a typo in the email address that I shared in the chat box, but I'm sharing it again now. It's ecqmarketing@toppanequaria.com. So if you want to get our Toppan Ecquaria t-shirt, just subscribe to our Telegram channel and then contact us via this email and we will get back to you. And also, if you wish to arrange for further discussion, you can also contact us via this email. Now I'm going to show you a screen with all the QR codes to our social media platforms. Just simply scan and follow us so that you can receive the latest updates and news about Toppan Ecquaria. And yep, I hope you enjoyed today's session, and we will see you soon again. All right? Thank you. Bye.